is East of June of 2025, and I'm Joseph Bell, and with the help of James Gallagher and Cassandra Key, we lead EnviroSensing cluster, and here we are for June, and we have a lightning talk session. We're recording this. I know a lot of folks pick this up on the recorded sessions. So what we're going to do here is lightning talks. We had 3 scheduled, but we're down to 2, so no big deal. So we're not pressed for time, John. Uh, John and myself are going to give a talk. John's going to give a talk about mouse cam, and I'm going to give a talk about watching dirt fall or dirt cam. And hopefully they'll complement each other nicely. And we'll talk a bit about the session that the cluster has been accepted for in the summer meeting, and that'll probably take us home. All right. Um, John, would you like to go first? I got you on mute.
I will
Okay.
unmute there. Sure, if you would like me to, what I will do is let me open the slideshow mode. And then back to Zoom and share.
Fantastic. So we have John Porter from UVA Environmental Sciences, and he's presenting on mouse cam.
Yeah, is that showing up as you would like it to be?
Photo sensing of small mammals. John
Okay,
Porter,
perfect.
take it away.
Okay, anyway, I have sort of a mixed job here. I do information management, I do monitoring stations, but I've also, my history is in small mammal population and community ecology. So one of the things on the barrier islands where we do research is there are distinct communities of small mammals on each of the islands. The same species are not on every island. So we want to monitor that small mammal community composition. We also like to measure occupancy, which is basically just sort of percent of the landscape where a species occurs. Now, historically, let's see, getting the right place here. The old days was about live trapping. On your right, you can see a Sherman live trap. It's basically a metal box. The rice rat goes into it and the door closes behind it, and then you go out and release it, ear tag it, do measurements on it, that sort of thing. The downside of this when working on barrier islands and other remote areas is you have to be there every day. I mean, mice die if you leave them in the trap for too long. So you need to be by at least daily in person to do that. Weather doesn't always cooperate. So I've had to be out there in conditions that we would not take a boat out under any other circumstances. But we've also switched to a different kind of boat that actually cannot go out in quite as intense weather there. So we've been very interested in the idea of photography, basically taking pictures of small mammals and identifying them there rather than actually going out and handling them. Now, this is a conventional trail camera that we've got set up. You can see let's see if I can, well, there you may identify the catbird that's in the picture there, the bane of our existence. It kept flying back and forth, and every time it would fly back and forth, it would trigger new pictures. Blowing branches, all sorts of things trigger the camera. So during the course of 111 days out there, this camera recorded 4,000 images. None of them were of small mammals. We got some deer pictures. We got lots of catbird pictures, and also just lots of pictures of blowing vegetation. So obviously, just plain using regular trail cams just is not working. Now, one of the things that's been going on is sort of if you can't fix the camera, fix the environment. So one way to do that is by basically using a container. Like for instance, on the left here, what we've got is we're in a 5-gallon painter's bucket looking straight down. We've got it inverted, so we're looking straight down towards the lid, and the lid has some bait in it, and there's 2 holes where animals can come in order to access that bait. The little wooden walls, white wooden walls on either side of the bait container, those are what we call walls of despair that basically block raccoons from reaching in to grab the bait, because once raccoons know there's food in there, your life is hell. So anyway, There have been some developments there. The Hunt Trap is a bucket-based camera, similar to the one on the left there. There have also been box-based cameras, and in that particular case was one that was actually buried under snow. There's the selfie trap, which is basically a tubular one where you're shooting down the length of a tube there. But the thing about these cameras, camera traps, was they were all pretty expensive. They all used very high-end trail cameras, and high-end trail cameras are designed to detect things and to take photographs of things over longer distances. That's one of the things that makes them high-end. And that's the opposite of what we want. We need something that focuses to within, less than 18 inches. And all of these camera traps or cameras are basically designed for taking pictures, 30 or 40 meters away. Um, so as a result, often they require factory adjustments in order to be able to focus inside a bucket or a box or a tube. Uh, so doing stations at about $800 per station is not very cost effective for us. So one of the things that we tried was to use inexpensive microprocessors in lieu of the trail camera. Arduino's, the passive infrared sensor worked great. They had really low power requirements. The serial camera that was available for them when we were working on this was simply wretched. I can't put it any other way. It was unreliable. It was slow. It just if you blinked hard, it bricked itself, and you had to buy a new one. It was not something that was sort of suitable for putting out in the field. On the other hand, the Raspberry Pi also can hook up to a PIR sensor easily through the GPIO input. It's camera, wonderful, HD video stills, really good to go. But the power requirement just killed us. We would have required a solar array to run one of these things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And to tell you the truth, lots of places where we study small mammals are not places where solar does very well. If you're studying forest small mammals, well, this is not really a good place to be doing solar power. So we were fooling around with things like there are some add-on boards for the Raspberry Pi that allow you to basically sort of boot the Raspberry Pi upon command. It's sort of a combination of Arduino and Raspberry Pi. And we were playing around with that sort of stuff when we happened upon something else. And that was an inexpensive mini trail camera. I don't know how many of you are familiar with trail cameras, but that camera in the upper left there is about a quarter the size of a normal game cam. Well, let's say a half to a quarter the size of a normal trail camera. It's one that has a very wide angle lens. It's got a 120-degree wide angle lens. And one of the characteristics of wide angle lenses, they have a very wide focal distance. And that means that they're close focus without having to call the factory and get a special run done at, added cost for cameras that focus closer. And the rest of the stuff we could just basically run down to Lowe's or Walmart or wherever that sells painter's buckets. And I've got the lid off a peanut butter jar there, and a couple blocks of wood for our walls of despair. And what we do is the camera would be shifted to point face down into the bucket. It would be put on top of the lid, and the bait container filled, and then we would take that protective outer bucket and lower it over the inner bucket with the camera inside it, and put a screw through it that keeps sort of hunters and raccoons and other ne'er-do-wells from lifting the top off the bucket and accessing the camera. We haven't actually had any. Well, we've had some problems reportedly down in Southwest Virginia with bears, maybe mauling things a little bit. But the walls of despair have worked wonders in terms of stopping a lot of raccoon disturbance problems. If a raccoon knows it can get in, there's no stopping them. But if it can't get in the first time, it sort of says, well, the heck with this, and moves on to something else. The other thing that's also great is these cameras have exceptional battery life. I say 4 to 5 months. We do 4 all the time, and just on 4 AA batteries. It's about $1 to battery it up. Your typical trail cam typically has 8 batteries, so they cost twice as much to run, and often they don't run nearly as long as these things do. Now, obviously, the battery life depends a little bit on how many photos you're taking. If you're taking a ton of flash photos, that'll drain things. But we can do photos and videos. We typically just do the photos because that's usually enough to sort of tell us the information that we need. So how has going with the inexpensive trail camera worked? Well, uh, over on the left's a picture with one of the cuter of the species that we work with, a southern flying squirrel, Glaucomys volans. Um, they're sitting on top of the wall, one of the walls of despair there. But anyway, we can basically do the whole camera, buckets and everything for, $65, $75, depending on sort of how cheap the cameras are at the time. We've detected 12 different species of small mammals, from shrews, which actually are really hard to catch in the live traps because they're so light, they don't really flip the treadle, to squirrels that were so determined to come into our trap, they actually chewed bigger holes in it, in the side. You'd actually see the squirrel head appear, and then the hole would get bigger, and then the next thing you'd see would be the gray squirrel inside. Anyway, we've accumulated about 83,000 different images, and of those 83,000, about 68,000 have identifiable small mammals within them. Well, that's 80%, which is one whole lot better than we were getting just sort of taking pictures of the uncontrolled environment there. So anyway, that's sort of the rundown on them. We've got a couple papers that you're welcome to look at. The first one sort of focuses on actually the construction of the traps and building them and that sort of thing, even as a video of how to build them as a supplementary material. And then the second is more in terms of doing some comparisons between that and live trapping in a couple of different contexts there. But anyway, that's my story, Joseph. It's back to you.
That's great stuff, John. Those little pesky critters, huh? That is, yeah, really, really fun. Enjoyed listening to you there.
Yeah,
Um,
I will stop the sharing. Anyway, and I will, if you want, I will put those links, those DOIs into the chat window in case anybody wants them. And I did also put in the chat window that sonification of our tide data that somebody did.
Thank you, thank you for that. I hope to check that out. Um, so this is neat, right? So you go from having to be like, do we get something? Do we get something? Do I have to go out, to just going out
Yeah.
regularly now, right?
Well, the thing that's nice about this is I've always envied the plant researchers. If there were thunderstorms predicted that day, if the winds were high, we'll come back another day. With small
Yeah,
mammals, with live traps, we couldn't do that. With the cameras, it's like, okay, well, we can't come back now. Let's come back in a week. Maybe the weather will be better. And then you are doing it with the camera traps, and it's working just as well.
yeah.
Um, so that's the big benefit for us. But it's also sort of an interesting concept of not dealing with the sensor changing the environment.
Right. No, it's yeah, yeah. You take something that has death involved in it, and you just change it. Just change it. Take that all out, and the risk, um, to
Yes.
go out, just the risk to
Well,
go out.
it definitely helps the fact that these small mammals tend to be very curious. They love to go into dark places. They like holes.
Right.
It's,
Right.
there's a lot about it. We do occasionally get snakes. I think we've gotten about 48 snakes in the time period there. But given that we've got 62,000 or 68,000 mammals, I think you can, and 48 snakes, I think you can say that it's a mammal trap and not a snake trap. We also
Sure.
sometimes get crabs. We sometimes also get insects. In principle, those shouldn't work though, because PIR sensors are basically detect differences, or they detect movements in things that have different temperatures.
Oh,
And
sure.
so, in principle, a snake would not really be sort of an ideal candidate for this because they're often very similar temperature to the environment. We do detect, all the detections tend to be daylight detections, which is, I assume, where you have a warm snake that's been outside sunning, coming into a bucket that's a little bit shaded, and that's enough of a temperature difference. But sometimes even insects will be enough to fire it off there.
Sure. That's really neat. I appreciated the first section where you mentioned tens of thousands of pictures and no critter. Yeah, sticks and everything else.
Yeah. If you want to real, there's also the talk of how the heck do you go through and classify 68,000 small mammal pictures? But I can. Uh, there is actually an undergraduate student that I have not fully sort of looked at his work yet, but actually took my corpus of classified images, and he says he can match about 98% with TensorFlow. So I may be I'm certainly doing it the hard way right now, but there is hope.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate that. Any questions from anyone else? I kind of just yapping here. All right. Well, now you get to hear. Oh, wait, Kelsey, go ahead. Yes.
I have two questions. The first is if you are trying to identify what all of the small mammals are, how similar they look in the camera images that you get, or how challenging is it, um, and how closely related are they? Is my first
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, no, this would not be something that you would want to use with two congeneric species of small mammals. So you wouldn't want to do this with both like two species of Paramyscus. So you'd probably be able to get it down to the genus, but probably not the individual species. Mostly it works pretty well. The question tends to come down to whether or not juveniles of one species are sometimes sort of hard to tell from adults of another species, and that can be a challenge. So one of the things I do have is the option while classifying images of saying, hey, I think it's this, but it might be something, this other thing. And also just plain saying, hey, I'm not confident enough in my identification. I'm sure there's a rodent here. This is often the case when you have like only a tail. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing is also, I will confess that I do sometimes use the fact that I've seen, 1,800 rice rat pictures, and then I have a picture of something that could be a rice rat or could be a white-footed mouse, which we've never seen out there, and I will call that a rice rat. I will go with sort of evidence that isn't strictly photo evidence for those sorts of things. And in most of our sites, it's actually been pretty easy to do it. One of the things I'm going to paste into the chat is our rogues gallery. If you go to that, what it will do is show you a lot of the species that we have identified. And this might be what I would go back to sort of refer to if I'm trying to refresh my memory on the difference between a brown rat and a rice rat. Did that help?
Oh yeah, I was just sort of curious about that. And then my other question was, um, what some, you can just rattle off the first few that come to mind, but I'm curious about the research applications of these data, what kinds of questions you would be answering with what you
Well,
learned from the camera.
yeah, one of the things that is different from this is live trapping. In live trapping, we know about individuals. Here, occasionally we have individuals that have distinctive characteristics in terms of location of ticks in the ears and things like that. But for the most part, I can't tell you about individuals. And I also don't know what sex they are. I also don't know what their weight is, although some of you may have suggestions for stress sensors under the under the thing to detect uh, the the differences in weight. Um, but it's really good for things like occupancy analysis. And the occupancy analysis is really occupancy modeling would be maybe a better thing to do it. It isn't just about knowing what percentage of the population is, or what percentage of places have a particular mammal, but you can also use a lot of covariates with it that allow you to basically try to figure out, well, what is it that's making it so this place is much more likely to have a small mammal than that other place. Uh,
Okay, yeah.
and then another thing that it's great for is if you are trying to just plain find out what species are there. It's done an excellent job of, for those places where we've done a lot of trapping over the years, the cameras have done a very good job sort of duplicating the species list that we got with the cameras, or excuse me, with the live traps. They seem to be fairly simpatico there. So those are sort of the big things. One of the things I love about the occupancy analysis is it's all probability based. So I can tell you how many cameras I need to deploy for how long in order to give you an occupancy estimate within a certain range. Um, you know, making some assumptions about the probability that you'll see an animal if it's really there. And for most of these species here, it tends to be about 30 or 40% of, if you see an animal in one of the traps, the odds are that it occurred in 40% of your opportunities to see it. So we break it up into 3-day chunks. And if we see that species of animal in one of those 3-day chunks, we say that we saw it, and you would see that animal in about 40% of those chunks, and that makes it really easy because the numbers converge really quickly if you have probabilities that high. If you're talking about something that's 1%, that's going to be difficult under any circumstance, and trapping or camera trapping, live trapping or camera trapping are both going to be hard there. There's a great book on occupancy analysis that will walk you through sort of all of the techniques on that.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, John, that was fantastic. Great. I thought that was really informative answer there. Okay, anybody else? All right, John. Well, thank you so much. I'm going
Oh,
to.
you're up.
Yeah, I know, right? Um, it's tough to follow there. Let me share my screen. It's only the green button in the middle. Gotcha. And then this. All right, now, I'm sorry. I'm only working on one screen. So, do you all see a PowerPoint?
Yep. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Too fast there. All right. So, thank you. Here's a chance for me to talk about some research that was done in the Mid Atlantic. I have to remain vague here because there was some data issues with the cooperator, and it was about 10 years ago. So a lot of this stuff is lifting, and time has passed, and we're now just now starting to talk about some of this stuff and able to present more on it. So it's a lightning talk. It's about development, and it's pretty cool, I think. So some key contributors: Matthew Cashman, lead geomorphologist from the USGS Maryland, as well as Melanie Mathis, Eric Boyd, and Zach Clifton. These were our crew leads. The rest of the team was fantastic. We had a small team of about 8. These were the leadership in there, and so this is what we're doing, right? So we're asking the question about bank pins, and if you don't know what a bank pin is, it's very simple. It's a piece of rebar or rolled steel that just gets slammed into the side of a bank, and it gets measured and it gets surveyed. So you have a time zero. People go back to this maybe after an event or periodically once every 3 months, and they'll measure the distance from which the bank has eroded from that original bank pin placement. Um, but this happens, right? And this is really frustrating because you don't know what to do, right? Have you ever been in this situation where you show up to your standard monitoring method and technique and then find this massive collapse over here? Those in the salt marsh who work with sediment elevation tables, SCTs, they're familiar with this sometimes when you lose that entire um, channel side, right? How do you do that? What do you do with your data when your bank pins are showing minimal erosion and yet a meter or two down the way you've lost massive amounts of sediment into the stream? So we started thinking about applications and how to improve this. um, Looked at, what do we do to survey the landscapes, right? We have point samples like bank pins, and there are a number of different varieties of this, to include some that have lights and the such. You could use lasers and lidar, right? These are standard surveying either by planes or drones or on the terrestrial landscape. And then this idea of structure from motion, right? Can we take pictures, overlap them and overlay them, and identify um, key spots to index on, and build a multi-dimensional model from that? So then we ask the question, right? Can spatially continuous surveys give more accurate data, a bigger picture, if you will? So here, if you don't know, here you go, right? The basics of structure from motion, right? This is a technique that was way back, right? World War II perfected, I believe. The Allies had perfected this from flights over, stereoscopic views where you can bring dimension to the landscape, dimension to 2D photos, right? So here's the idea. You have some target, and the target itself can move, or the camera can move. And in our instance, we're going to move the camera, and the target is going to stay the same. But the idea is to bathe this unit in photos, find the points in the software and identify them, and then stitch the photos on top of them, right? So you have this algorithm that's going and it's finding P3 in all the photos, and stacks it and indexes it and orientates it on that. P5 in all the photos, it does that face, right? So you're getting multi-facets, multi-faces photographed and then turned into dimensional objects. Our question was, this works for tourists, can it work for scientists, right? So we wanted to take this basic idea that, somebody um, basically took all the photos from tourists of the Statue of Liberty and generated a three-dimensional object, the Statue of Liberty itself, in a software. And that's really cool, right? Because they themselves didn't even take the photos; they just gathered this, harvested this from social media. So, right, what if, right? What if this works on the banks? So what we set out to do was we started putting targets on the banks, in the locations where we had bank pins, and we wanted to try and do this survey to dimensionalize the bank surface and see if we could measure loss and or gain, and basically turn the whole thing vertically instead of horizontally, if you will. For a lot of the original structure from motion techniques in science. So we went out and we put a whole bunch of targets up in different spots, and then we took pictures like this, right? So you get our sequence of pictures on the bank, one set further back, one set further close, or close in, and we flip the camera to bring in orientation. And then after we did that, we waited, right? And then this is kind of the key part of the talk here, is watching dirt fall. So we set up our camera to look down channel. These are older pictures of our targets, and you can see how they are eroding. But really important, I'll play it again. Watch right here. Boom. Right? That's a slump, right? We call it a slump on video, and of course it hits our target, right? So the first people say, well, was the target impacting the erosion? No, because we had slumps all over the place. We just happened to catch this on video. And just one more time, right here, this target right here, flow comes in, boom, right? Uh, Pretty cool. So we caught that on video, and then when we come back, we basically finalize our shoot and reestablish our targets. So what does it look like when we do the math? Right now, full disclaimers. Uh, I have to put them out there, right? It must put them out there. We don't. U.S. government doesn't endorse products, and this is provisional data, so do not cite or reproduce this in any way. But here's what we're looking at, right? We're looking at the point pins on that bank, bing, 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 and then the bank itself. also being picked up with the vegetation. And when we take this object that we create from the photos and the software processing, we can do difference mapping on it, right? So we took the first scan that we did in May, and then we came back the next year and we took the scan, or we took it after that event, right, to get a fresh face, if you will, and then we difference mapped them. And what you can see is just the spatial distribution of the erosion, right? And it's really neat, and it makes a lot of sense. When we looked at our picture previous, this is the straighter run of that river section, and then this is where that curve was coming in, right? So we're seeing that aggressive erosion taking place there. Pretty neat, right? And then right, so the bank pin's estimated 2 centimeters of loss. So at this point we were to estimate 2.5 centimeters of loss across, and we had much more. So just kind of wrapping it up and closing things out, if we just want to look at the bank and equipment and video monitor and not do much else, it's pretty cheap for us. We can get it from, like John was saying, from just a camera recording and taking that card back, to telemetering this over, for about $1,500 now. It's more expensive. This is a little dated, but yeah, there's a slew of trail cams out there that work well. They have an what is it? Kind of an ecosystem of mounts that you can benefit from. And then there's a whole bunch of other pictures, omnidirectionals, and then the loggers, right? John mentioned serial cameras. The GS has a big interest in serial cameras that interface with the loggers for security reasons. Um, what would it cost to do the structure for motion on the bank? This is a rough estimate, about 25K per year. And so what are we looking at, right? Here's another example that we put together. Here's it. Time zero was May 2017, and then T1 in this episode was September. So that period of time, how much was eroded? 0.6 in this window, 0.2 down here. Uh, Pretty neat. A couple things that came out are USGS targets. These are generated to randomly and uniquely, so that when the software sees them, it knows what position they're in space and time. And we use those targets to index and get ground control. It's pretty fun when you get to ask for a graphics PC to do your work with the GS. IT is like, what do you need that for? Graphics processing, right? This is a heavy GPU intensive process. Also surveying, right? Your end game, your end product, your end product that you produce is only as good as the ground control that you have and the survey that goes into it. That's the take-home message there. And of course, picture taking, right? You got to make sure you know how to take pictures. But yeah, so that was that, and then I kind of threw in some bonus slides because I knew we had a little bit of extra time. We did fly the reach. We had a group of students from UMBC help us out here, and we also had a professional group fly the reach for us because the USGS was under a UAV prohibition. We weren't allowed to fly. So I'm going to show you now is a point cloud. You're going to run through this reach. It's about 1 kilometer long. This is a farm road, and then we're going to go downstream. And as I mentioned, it's a point cloud. And what does that mean? This is made of dots, millions of dots, and each one of those dots has a 3D point reference, and it also has a color to that represents, that basically masks it, right? So we have lat, long, and elevation, and also texture in a sense. So when you fly through this, you're going to see trees that look like they've been whacked up, and they have. Right, this is software getting rid of the vegetation, so that we can see as much as possible around it. And if you remember that image I showed you about the basics from structure for motion, right? We're lawn mowing this many times, almost 100 times, right? We're going one way, and then we're going horizontally, and then we're going at an angle, all the time shooting straight down so that we can get this image, right? So we fly over the road. That's one station on the right. That's upstream. This is pre-restoration. That's our first bank where cattle come in. We were measuring there. That's a ground target. If you missed it, there's another target over there. That's our gear. A hypoxic puddle from an oxbow that forms. There's another ground target for ground control. We have the ground targets out wide too to keep the mesh from doing weird things. But yeah, so we're flying through this reach. Another target. And we have, this is what we have. We have a three-dimensional model of this. We actually printed this out and handed it to the cooperator, and we're like, here's the model of your reach before um, you go through the restoration. And let's see if I can play it one more time. But yeah, again, this is a point cloud, right? If I were able to stop it and click on a dot, like in the software, we would find its lat long, elevation, and any other characteristic we may have tagged to it. It's not perfect, right? See areas of higher vegetation. You don't always get through that. If we wanted to, we had to ensure that we also flew this way so that we could get representation of the banks, right? Because it's just like it's photography. What you see is what you get, right? If you cannot see it, if you don't have that line of sight, you cannot render it in the software. So pretty neat stuff. Um, and then this happened, right? This was catastrophic, and just amazing, right? This was a very small stream, and it kicked up over um, 10,000 CFS estimated. I think the point measure was 9,000. Yeah, 9,600 cubic feet per second, and that all changed in minutes. Just unbelievable. Velocity jumped from 1.5 feet per second at our gauge to 6 feet per second. These are side looking velocity meters, so we were able to get like a profile of what was in the channel. And it's only a 4.5 square mile watershed. This was essentially a debris flow. Here's that road that you saw on our first fly through. That was pre-storm. Just absolutely the bridge. This is downstream as you look up. Um, the bridge was just wiped out. The asphalt just turned and shredded like paper. It was just spectacular to see. Um, Somebody saved here. They did a rescue, so fortunately nobody lost their life. But yeah, just huge chunks, massive boulders, and yeah, right. Because we had that first survey, um, we were able to use LiDAR from 2012. We were able to put it up from our structure from motion gain from our UAV survey. We basically went down to the base layer, that the lidar that had the highest amount of error. So we matched up our errors, and we did a difference map of the whole reach to identify where places were blown out. And it was just amazing. Like this, so this is feet of loss, right? So here's three 4 feet of loss, all in these sections. And some of these sections had bank pins, but most of these didn't. These sections were just like, when you choose to put bank pins in, you look at the landscape, you do your best geomorphic assessment of it, and you can't hit all the spots. But here, because we were able to have that surveying both on the ground, that was huge because we came back. Some places our targets were still there, and then also in the air. So really neat. Focusing in here, this is just ridiculous. Please excuse the units. We change them up a little bit. But no, feet. Okay, so 70-foot bank retreat. I mean, this just washed the entire bank away. Um, and then also heavily impacted down here. For reference, they found pallets 15, 20 feet up in the trees downstream. Bank pins estimated 5 feet of retreat over 5 years. um, the bank pins that we found. So if they weren't 5 feet long, right, they were gone. So, and then this is one more thing. So I'll close on this. This is a video of kind of like what the heck, right? So if you pay attention right here, we have a target. So we have reference for that. It's on a tree, right? We're monitoring short term, so we were okay there. But I want you to watch just down to the right of the target. There's a seep here, and I want you to watch it activate. It's like, what? Here we go. Check this out. Stream comes up in response to the precipitation. Stream starts to go down, and almost like a pump, it's activating a couple of these seeps. Just absolutely remarkable, and just the complexities of sediment monitoring in floodplains like that. So I'll end it there and stop sharing, or keep sharing, and just open up for questions. But yeah, so that's really cool stuff. Yes, go ahead, Kelsey.
I was wondering, this is not my area of expertise, um, but I was wondering if structure from motion is easier than LiDAR, and if there are benefits to using that instead of using LiDAR.
It's, yeah, this is a really great question, and the answer is it depends, right? But I'm not just going to leave you there. I'll try and give you a bit more insight on that. Lidar is expensive. It is super expensive. Whether you're buying your survey units, or you're renting them, or you're having somebody do it for you, a lidar survey is very expensive. If if you have a landscape that has good topographic relief, uh, so it's not super flat, um, and you have an ability to put ground control in, structure from motion works very well. If you have the ability to bathe the area in imagery, now they're merging videos, right? So if you take high definition, high speed videos, you can actually start to merge the videos together for more accuracy. So the question is, like, if you have the ability to set very good ground control, and the targets at which you are looking to render the shape from are visible from most of the sides, yes, it is a viable option. They use it in museums. Curators use in museums where they set these targets out next to the specimens, and they take pictures of them, and then they recreate from that dimensional model, so they don't have to put the original, if you will, on display. So yeah, you can get to the finest of details of a piece of art. In the field, you're probably centimeters accuracy, tens in the vertical, tens of centimeters.
Cool. Thank you
Does
for
that
that.
help?
Yes.
Yeah, I was also going to ask a little bit about sort of the criticality of having markers that persist, because obviously when you had the catastrophic thing, I bet you lost a ton of markers. Um,
Yeah,
and things like LiDAR might be able to sort of avoid that if you're able to set. I'm thinking not of aerial LiDAR. I'm thinking of terrestrial scanning terrestrial LiDAR, which is has been used by some of the students in my department for studying forest structure. And
yes,
those units are not at the same level of scale as the aerial units. And you could set one up at a particular spot, or at a set of particular spots that were sort of a little bit remote from the creek, albeit hopefully on a uh, some sort of mini tower so that you can see down into the creek. That's one of your challenges is you get blocked by the other bank there.
right.
Uh, but that in principle, that wouldn't need the reference markers.
Right, because your base station is controlled, right? If your team is right, your team is always on it, right? They're out there, they're connecting to their base station, they're geolocating their survey head, and poof, right? That's the key. We spoke of a number of different evolutions from moving the targets up and out of way of the bank, because they don't have to be part of the bank. um, they just have to be there, and they themselves have to be static, right? We can't have them moving around. But yes, you're right. The side scan, or not side scan, but the terrestrial lidars for bank scanning, and I mean they can catch blades of grass to that level of resolution. Butterflies, I've seen
Yeah.
them.
However, I will also say, thank goodness you have your graphics PC, because this will damn near break almost anything. It's
Right.
it's a the computational load on processing. Well, especially taking something that really is a data set that says there was something here. It's X, Y, Z. Here's the point. Now take lots and lots and lots of those and combine those into a picture where you can say, okay, well, this was a bank point, this
Right.
was a tree point, this was a something else point. Uh, the videos and the photos look of point clouds look so good because we're so good at interpreting them.
Yes.
The getting the computer up to that level is difficult.
Yes. Yes. We would start them at the end of the night and pick them up on the morning. Our runs, um, for the computational times, usually took about 10-15 hours. Yeah. Yeah, so that getting the graphics card, yeah, that's time is money, right? And that saves you a lot. But it's really to your point too. Like not every ground control goes in either, right? We use ground controls to check the the accuracy. So we have our ground controls that are in the system but aren't considered, and and yeah, you can get into the complexities pretty quickly here. But yeah, to your points, right? The side scan lidars are awesome. Um, Structure from motion when you can get it is awesome too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some stuff in the chat quickly. Yeah, drones are so cool. Yeah. Um, and so we're really really happy in the GS to be able to fly drones again. Uh, and but it is expensive for us. I don't know how many folks know that, but we have to have clean drones to make sure that they don't they pass a security check, right? So that gets costly. Which is why in this case we furnished that out, right? We have a furnished record. Um, yeah, cool. Okay, well that's great. That pretty much closes us out, I think, for our talks. Just quickly for the group that's here, John, for your interests. Um, yeah, sure, no problem, Cassandra. Yeah, we have our cluster has been accepted for a session in the summer meeting. I'll post. We'll follow up after this because there's a note about the workshop for attending, but we'll post out the kind of the abstract of what our session is. But it's in short, it's relating space monitoring from space, satellite monitoring, to point monitoring on the ground, that continuum in between, and how how folks are using both in point measurements and space measurements for monitoring. And the theme is innovation and ingenuity, I think, or use. So it matches nicely. We have some talks lined up for folks that are really doing groundbreaking research in this area. So it's really fun. We can talk about that a lot more in wow. So July is the next session. So we'll have to send out an email. Um, I'm just realizing now we're on time crunch there. So um, yes, Cassandra, let's yeah, time flies, right? So let's mark that for something that we have to do quickly. But that's all I got. James or Cassandra, anything?
Hmm.
No, let's just meet soon to talk about
Yep.
July and such great talks today. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
That's
I
so
kind
fun.
of want to make one of those mouse cams. I like
Yep.
that. We
All
have
all the instructions are there on the video associated with that paper, the DOI I hooked in there. In the supplementary materials, there's a video that literally has me starting off with 2 buckets and ending up with a mouse cam. They're a lot of fun
excellent.
for the backyard too.
Well,
You can
that's what I'm thinking of because we got some rodents back there and it would just be cool.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did also throw in an XKCD link that I thought was sort of funny because it's different types of scientific papers, and the first type is we put a camera somewhere new.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I've seen that XKCD comic before. I mean,
Yes.
that particular one. I've,
Yeah,
of course.
that particular one is almost too on point. It's a little
Yes, it is. So I see the video and that
See it.
DOI link. Yeah, that's pretty darn nice. Okay, excellent.
and I'm also happy to help out with any questions there.
Yeah.
Sure. I did actually have a question about the ground truth thing, and we can maybe follow up. We can talk about this a little bit later, but I don't really understand why you had to put markers as you flew over, whereas like with like the tourist photos, there obviously aren't positional markers on the Statue of Liberty, except there are, sort of, aren't there? So,
Yes, this is a very good question, James. And simply put, we put out our targets because we wanted to make sure that we could we could tie it into the datum for scale, right?
okay,
If so, the Statue of Liberty was essentially a unit. I could stretch it and dimensionalize it and print it, um, but the size of the book may not have reflected the size of the book to scale.
right,
So
gotcha.
we wanted to scale.
Right.
And
Okay. Okay.
I mean, the
Yeah.
Statue of Liberty is in one sense its own ground control marker because
Right.
it's immutable. Now, if you want to take the Statue of Liberty and have her start waving her arms around and things like that, then all of a sudden you would need to add additional markers to her. But as long as she stays frozen like a statue, you're good to go. So we
Okay.
suggest that you add Statue of Liberty statues all along your streams.
Okay. Yeah. Little statues of liberty. Yeah. There you
that's
go.
right. Yes, all perfect, right? Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's
Okay.
for scaling. Yeah,
Yeah,
excellent. We can do
interesting.
that.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, John, I was thinking about load cells when I saw
Right.
your mouse cam. Like you could see how much they eat, how much like have a time
Yes.
series of
The biggest issue is going to be moisture.
yeah, yeah,
And that's moisture in two ways. One of which is that sometimes, well, one of the issues we do have is sometimes fogging because when you have temperature
Mhm.
changes, you get sort of condensation on the buckets and also
Right.
on the camera. So that's one sort of issue. The other, which is actually the fact that sometimes the buckets on the ground on barrier islands, actually the bottom gets wet. We've got pictures of rice rats standing on top of the walls of despair while the rest of the bucket is full of water. And thankfully, subsequent pictures do not show a drowned rice rat. So apparently they
yeah.
were able to get out. But that's the sort of thing that would you'd really need to waterproof the hell out of the load cell.
Yes,
But
you
I would be interested if you have if
Hmm.
anybody has sort of some types of load cell that they think might be suitable. The other question also is how do you deal with the fact that the bucket is a large, it's about a 12-inch circular area,
yeah,
and ideally you'd like to have it poised on a pin, but it's a tippy
Right.
thing. So how to sort of deal with that. So I would be glad to collaborate on anything there.
yeah.
The lysimeter is a similar issue, right? And yeah, it's a similar deal. Lysimeter, for used for measuring soil water content.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure I think they solved that problem by having a plate. It sits on a plate.
Okay.
But they're like notoriously difficult to do, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
this standard one is really big, and you have to get like 2 cubic yards of dirt and have it be perfectly dry, and then weigh it, and then you put it in there, and anyways,
Yeah, no, I think, well, I agree. Well, the other thing is also the question is what the error is relative to the size of the mammals. Like, for
yeah,
instance, if we're
right.
2 grams off, we're 2 grams off. But the question is if we're 30 grams off, that's a little different since most of these things don't weigh
Right.
that much.
That's more than a shrew.
Yes, that's three least truths. Cryptotus parva, they're about
Tiny.
10 grams each.
Right. It's amazing. That's a whole
Thanks.
mammal. Okay, listen, I gotta go.
Yes. We'll
Thanks a
wrap up.
lot.
We'll wrap up ESIP June 2025. Fantastic. Thank you
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
for joining us.
And we'll have a meeting soon to make sure we have the session for the July session all dialed.
Yes. Yes.
Cool. Great.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, John.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Super great to see you, John. Glad
Yep.
we did it.
Yeah,
Yep,
thanks very
glad I
much.
got back from the field in time. I could even shower first.
There you go. Nothing like cleanliness. Okay, take it
Yes.
easy, man.
Bye. Thanks, Cassandra. Bye. Bye, James.